I'm Jack Kurtz, and I'm with Pretzel Pride Network, and today we're here with our mayor, Jim Gitz. Jim, nice to meet you.
Nice to be with you, Jack.
We're going to ask him a few questions about Freeport as a city, and also kind of about his personal life and past history. First question, what do you love most about our town? Like, what is the one thing that you think makes Freeport special than any other place?
Well, I would have to say Creek Park.
Yeah.
I especially like the area around the waterfall.
Oh, yeah.
I go for walks there a lot. I also like a lot of the old majestic homes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that is also a part of our city's heritage. This once was a very wealthy community.
Oh, yeah.
It still remains special.
Mm. Yeah, Creek Park's definitely a beautiful place, especially in the summertime. We all have our favorite places to eat in Freeport. I prefer Route 20. What's one place that you enjoy the most?
You know, this sounds like an equivocation, but I like them all. I will confess that I have a special place in my heart for family restaurants that are locally owned and have their own special brand as opposed to the chains.
Yeah.
Nothing against McDonald's or Wendy's or Culver's. In fact, I like a good Culver's hamburger, but you know, I think the restaurants that are particular to Freeport, places like Semino's and Canova's or Amigos, have their own special ambience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Union Dairy, best place to get ice cream in town, if you ask me.
Only place to get ice cream.
What's your go-to ice cream scoop when you go to Union Dairy?
Well, you know, they had something that I really liked several years ago called tiramisu.
Mm-hmm.
And then naturally, the ice creams I like seem to go out of style. So I don't have a current favorite. They have one I think was called Lincoln Douglas. It was a centennial ice cream. That was pretty good too.
As a college graduate, you were also student body president of your class at Bradley University, and you also graduated from Northwestern University. Do you have any words of encouragement or advice for kids who are going off to college soon coming this fall?
Well, I do. First, don't let money get in your way. I know that that's easier said than done. And it's a lot harder now than it was, obviously, years ago when I was in school. But for those that are college bound, no matter what, have the resources, my advice is have a good time, but remember why you're there. Develop really good study habits, and that will serve you well. For those who are struggling, you know, please keep up the struggle and go to junior college and make your career, because college is not only about finding a good job. College is also about what we learn about the world around us. Mm-hmm. I was the first of my family to go to college. I never looked back. I'm very glad that I did it. Yeah. And I hope that students that are trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives, college is a good place to go to figure it out.
Oh yeah, I agree. Your first time serving as the mayor of Freeport came in 1997 and lasted until 2005. What was your biggest challenge once you took over as mayor of Freeport?
I would say my personal challenge, the biggest one, was recognizing that being mayor as the chief executive office is different than being a legislator. Mm-hmm. And it's different than being a lawyer. Being an attorney can help you with thinking through issues and legal ramifications. But if you act like a lawyer and not a chief executive officer, it's not going to go well for you. So learning to balance and learning to trust your staff, because you can't do everything yourself. So becoming the chief executive officer, I would say that the biggest challenge for the city in governance was and still is the economy. You know, Freeport had a handful of large companies like Goodyear, Honeywell, Newell at that time. These companies provided most of our employment base, and we were not able to diversify fast enough to really keep our economy together when jobs were moving to places like Mexico and China. And that's something we don't get to control locally. That's happening all over the Midwest. It's happening in Galesburg. It's happening in the Quad Cities. It's part of what's going on in America. But that doesn't eliminate the need for us to recognize that we have to rebuild and change the way we do things in our community in order to keep the quality of life high and in order to give young people a better future.
Public confidence and trust in our state government is pretty low right now. To the everyday citizen, it just seems as if our state government isn't getting anything done, or at least not being very successful. What do you think the problem is within our state government, or is there anything you think that needs to be changed?
I think the fundamental problem in our state government is the General Assembly and the governor are unable to compromise. The governor says, I've got these rules that I want changed. including right to work. The General Assembly says some of the things you want to do we don't think are related to the budget process, we're not going to do them. Okay, so when two people don't agree, what do? So far, they've all been pawing the ground and not coming to any central point. I believe that it's important for people to find ways that they can agree. Sometimes you start with the small stuff and work to the big stuff. But you know, they need to start acting like adults. And that goes especially for the governor who sets the tone. I've learned as a mayor that you can't just simply stomp your feet and rule by decree. So I give Governor Ronner high marks, very high marks, for wanting to introduce new ideas, new concepts, and do things in a different way. The problem is in the last couple of years, I don't think they've gotten anywhere. So if door A doesn't get you where you need to go, well then, to me, you start looking at other ways to get there. So I want to see forward progress in our state, and I think the people of Illinois want to as well. And there is recent publications about the bond ratings of the state and et cetera that to me are frankly alarming. So I don't quite understand why reasonable people can't sit down and reason together and start making some decisions that would be very helpful for the people of the state and communities like Freeport and your school system as well.
Very good point. After this last presidential election, a lot of people are tired of hearing about the crazy circus show and what went on in 2016 and the typical political debates. To some kids like myself who one day want to run for elected office, what would you say to them? What would you say to encourage them?
Well, I think a lot of the politics right now is ideologically driven, meaning if you're on one side, you say, okay, it's got to be this way all the way through, or we don't compromise. I mean, in fact, in Washington, they try to say, Democrats, you didn't win the election, so you're irrelevant. Well, you're not irrelevant when you're close to half of the House of Representatives, and you're only a couple of seats away from controlling the Senate. That means that the representation is pretty evenly divided. So that screams out to me the same thing we're talking about with the state. People ought to reason together, and they ought to come to some middle ground. So I think what we have is a bunch of crazies, frankly, at the state and the federal level, who are so ideologically driven that they've forgotten what people want. And people want progress on the daily things that affect their lives. They want, if you're a student, you want affordable tuition, and you want a country that's worth living in, and a community that's worth living in. You know, if you're a senior citizen, you want some guarantee that you have access to medical care and that they're not going to mess around with Social Security. If you're a working person, you want some assurance that the government and the corporations are not going to pull the ground out from under you on your jobs. I mean, so there's some very obvious things that I think that people want that affect their daily lives, and I don't think people want these ideological battles. So what's my advice to young people? Well, my first advice is don't turn your back on it and run the other direction and say politics is evil. No, engage. In fact, the big banks, the big corporations, and the people who kind of run the economy like it pretty nicely if we don't get involved. They would just assume that this is run as some kind of an oligarchy. I reject that. My whole life I've spent being involved. I was working in political elections before I was even old enough to vote, which at that time, by the way, was 21. So I want young people to claim this country as their own, to make their voice heard, to bring about the changes that they think that are appropriate. And I also want all of us to remember that we're in this boat together. This is not about young people versus old people. This is not about working people versus rich people. In a sense, the United States should have room for all of us at the table, and that includes minorities, that includes women, that includes everyone. That's what this country's premise was based upon. That's why your parents and mine came to this country some 100 and some years ago. And I think sometimes we forget our roots, and we forget that at our peril. That's my take on it.
You mentioned earlier that you had 2 kids. We're kids ourselves. And going forward, maybe for some people, our future, we don't know what we want to do. What do you want to see for our generation, and what would you advise the future of this country and of this city?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question to end on. I want a country that doesn't become authoritarian, which I worry about. a country that trusts its citizens instead of surveils them, a country that provides opportunity, economic opportunity, and a hand up as opposed to a handout for everyone. I think there's if you look at the long arc of history, representative government, democracies, republics, that's what we have, a republic, don't always end well. And I think that there's some question about what the fate of this country is if private power and private wealth begins to accumulate to a point where our voice doesn't count. And I think it's important for us to take back our government, take back the fundamental means of production in this country, and to make sure that it serves all of us instead of some of us. So my great hope for my children and for you and for your classmates is that they're going to be part of the great struggle to reinvent our country and to keep it moving according to the original concept of this American dream. I believe fervently in the United States of America. I do believe that it has a role to play in this world. I do believe that we have played a crucial role in preserving democratic institutions for the last 100 years. The question is what is our role going to be in the next 100 years? And if you look around you and you look at the government of China and Russia and a lot of other countries in North Korea, we should not take our democracy for granted. That's my strong take. And the only way that we preserve those institutions is that every one of us claims our birthright as citizens and enforces that birthright.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for your time. We've gotten to know a little bit more about our mayor, Jim Gitz, his past history and his views on the future and for us kids and the city government. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good to join you, Jeff.